Hey guys, welcome to Read Aloud, what are we on, 27 for October 20th. Whew. Okay, here we go. I've been working on those jazz chords. I think I'm starting to get them down to a point where it's starting to sound good. Let's see. Yeah, give me a few minutes. Okay, thanks. Okay, so here we go. The custodian was going to come by and get my garbage. I told him to come back. So here we go. Let's see. Okay. Oh, it was the spiders. I forgot about the spiders. Bilbo saw that the moment had come when he must do something. He could not get up at the brutes and he had nothing to shoot with, but looking about he saw in this place there were many stones lying in what appeared to be a now dry little watercourse. Bilbo was a pretty fair shot with the stone, and it did not take him long to find a nice smooth egg-shaped one that fit his hand cozily. As a boy, he used to practice throwing stones at things until rabbits and squirrels and even birds got out of his way as quick as lightning if they saw him stoop. And even grown up, he had still spent a deal of his time at quoits dart throwing, shooting at the wand, bowls, ninepins, and other quiet games of aiming and throwing sort. Indeed, he could do lots of things, besides blowing smoke rings, asking riddles, and cooking that I haven't had time to tell you about. There is no time now. While he was picking up stones, the spider had reached Bomber, and soon he would have been dead. At that moment, Bilbo threw. The stone struck the spider plunk on the head, and it dropped senseless off the tree, flopped to the ground, with all its legs curled up. The next stone went whizzing through a big web, snapping its cords, and taking off the spider sitting in the middle of it, whack, dead. After that, there was a deal of commotion in the spider colony, and they forgot the dwarves for a bit. I can tell you. They could not see Bilbo, but they could make a good guess at the direction from which the stones were coming. As quick as lightning, they came running and swinging toward the Hobbit, flinging out their long threads in all directions till the air seemed full of waving snares. Bilbo, however, soon slipped away to a different place. The idea came to him to lead the furious spiders further and further away from the dwarves, if he could, to make them curious, excited, and angry all at once. When about 50 had gone off to the place where he had stood, he threw some more stones at these, and at others that had stopped behind, and then dancing among the trees, he began to sing a song to infuriate them and bring them all after him, and also to let the dwarves hear his voice. This is what he sang. Old fat spider spinning in a tree, old fat spider can't see me, Attercop, won't you stop? Stop your spinning and look for me. Old Tommodotty, all big body, old Tommodotty can't spy me, Attercop, down you drop, you'll never catch me up your tree. Not very good, perhaps, but then you must remember that he had to make it up himself on the spur of a very awkward moment. Hey, awkward, that was one of our spelling words. It did what he wanted anyway. As he sang, he threw some more stones and stamped. Practically all the spiders in the place came after him. Some dropped to the ground, others raced along the branches, swung from tree to tree, or cast new ropes across the dark spaces. They made for his noise far quicker than he had expected. They were frightfully angry. Quite apart from the stones, no spider has ever liked being called Attercop or Tomnoddy, or Tomnoddy, of course. It's insulting to anybody. I have no idea what those mean. Off Bilbo scuttled to a fresh place, but several of the spiders had run now to different points in the glade where they lived, and were busy spinning webs across all the places between the tree stems. Very soon the Hobbit would be caught in a thick fence of them all around. That, at least, was the spider's idea. Standing now in the middle of the hunting and spinning insects, Bilbo plucked up his courage and began a new song. Lazy Lob and Crazy Cob are weaving webs to wind me. I am far more sweet than other meat, but still they cannot find me. Here I am, naughty little fly, you are fat and lazy. You cannot trap me, though you try, in your cobwebs crazy. There was a picture back here. With that, he turned and found that the last space between two tall trees had been closed with a web, but luckily not a proper web. Only great strands of double-thick spider rope run hastily backwards and forwards from trunk to trunk. Out came his little sword. He slashed the threads to pieces and went off singing. The spiders saw the sword, though I don't suppose they knew what it was, and at once the whole lot of them came hurrying after the hobbit along the ground and the branches, hairy legs waving, nippers and spinners snapping, eyes popping full of froth and rage. They followed him into the forest until Bilbo had gone as far as he dared. Then, quieter than a mouse, he stole back. He had precious little time, he knew, before the spiders were disgusted and came back to their trees where the dwarves were hung. In the meanwhile, he had to rescue them. The worst part of the job was getting up onto the long branch where the bundles were dangling. I don't suppose he would have managed it if the spider had not luckily left a rope hanging down. With its help, though it stuck to his hand and hurt him, he scrambled up only to meet an old, slow, wicked, fat-bodied spider who had remained behind to guard the prisoners and had been busy pinching them to see which was the juiciest to eat. It had thought of starting the feast while the others were away, but Mr. Baggins was in a hurry, and before the spider knew what was happening, it felt his sting and rolled off the branch dead. Bilbo's next job was to loose a dwarf. What was he to do? If he cut the string which hung him up, the wretched dwarf would tumble thump to the ground a good way below. Wiggling along the branch, which made all the poor dwarfs dance and dangle like ripe fruit, he reached the first bundle. Feely or Keely, he thought, by the tip of a blue hood sticking out of the top. Most likely Feely. He thought by the tip of a long nose poking out of the winding threads. He managed by leaning over to cut most of the strong, sticky threads that bound him round. And then, sure enough, with a kick and a struggle, most of Feely emerged. I am afraid Bilbo actually laughed at the sight of him jerking his stiff arms and legs as he danced on the spider strings under his armpits, just like one of those funny toys bobbing on a wire. Somehow or other, Feely got onto the branch, and then he did his best to help the hobbit, although he was feeling very sick and ill from spider poison, and from hanging most of the night and the next day, wound round and round with only his nose to breathe through. It took him ages to get the beastly stuff out of his eyes and eyebrows, and as for his beard, he had cut most of it off. Well, between them, they started to haul up first one dwarf and then another and slash them free. Some of them were better off than Feely, and some of them were worse. Some had hardly been able to breathe at all. Long noses are sometimes useful, you see. And some had been more poisoned. In this way, they rescued Keely, Biffer, Beaufort, Dory, and Nori. Poor old Bombur was so exhausted. He was the fattest and had been constantly pinched and poked that he just rolled off the branch and fell plop on the ground, fortunately onto leaves, and lay there. But there were still 5 dwarves hanging on the end of the branch when the spiders began to come back, more full of rage than ever. Bilbo immediately went to the end of the branch nearest the tree trunk and kept back those that crawled up. He had taken off his ring when he rescued Feely and forgotten to put it on again, so now they all began to splutter and hiss. "Now we see you, you nasty little creature. We will eat you and leave your bones." Oh, this is a cool picture. "We will eat you and leave your bones and skin hanging on a tree." Ugh, he's got a nasty sting, has he? Well, we'll get him all the same, and then we'll hang him head downwards for a day or two. While this was going on, the other dwarves were working at the rest of the captives and cutting at their threads with their knives. Soon all would be free, though it was not clear what would happen after that. The spiders had caught them pretty easily the night before, but that had been unawares and in the dark. This time, there looked like being a horrible battle. Suddenly, Bilbo noticed that some of the spiders had gathered around old Bombur on the floor and had tied him up again and were dragging him away. He gave a shout and slashed at the spiders in front of him. They quickly gave way, and he scrambled and fell down the tree right into the middle of those on the ground. His little sword was something new in the ways of stings for them, how it darted to and fro. It shone with delight as he stabbed at them. Half a dozen were killed before the rest drew off and left Bombur to Bilbo. Come down, he shouted to the dwarves on the branch. Don't stay up there and be netted. For he saw spiders swarming up all the neighboring trees and crawling along the boughs above the heads of the dwarves. Down the dwarves scrambled, or jumped, or dropped, 11 all in a heap, most of them very shaky and little use on their legs. There they were at last, 12 of them, counting poor old Bombur, who was being propped up on either side by his cousin Bifur and his brother Bofur. And Bilbo was dancing about and waving his sting, and hundreds of angry spiders were goggling at them all around and about and above. It looked pretty hopeless. Then the battle began. Some of the dwarves had knives and some had sticks, and all of them could get at stones. And Bilbo had his elvish dagger. Again and again the spiders were beaten off, and many of them were killed. But it could not go on for long. Bilbo was nearly tired out. Only the 4 of the dwarves were able to stand firmly, and soon they would all be overpowered like weary flies. Already the spiders were beginning to weave their webs all around them from tree to tree. In the end, Bilbo could think of no plan except to let the dwarves into the secret of his ring. He was rather sorry about it, but it could not be helped. I am going to disappear, he said. I shall draw the spiders off if I can, and you must keep them together and make it in the opposite direction. To the left there, that is more or less the way towards the place where we last saw the elf fires. It was difficult to get them to understand, what with their dizzy heads and the shouts and the whacking of sticks and the throwing of stones. But at last Bilbo felt he could delay no longer. The spiders were drawing their circle ever closer. He suddenly slipped on the ring, and to the great astonishment of the dwarves, he vanished. Seems like a good place to stop. Thanks, guys.